Yo, what's going on, everyone? Today we are coming at you with the Dragonflight 10.2.5 Brewmaster Monk Guide, specifically for keys. So, getting things started off with our talents. So, on the monk side of our talent tree, we are going to be using the loadout that you can see on the left. Now, there is two differences here, where on tyrannical weeks, we are going to take 2 points on the bottom right there for generous pour, which gives our allies near us 4% extra avoidance, basically. And then on fort weeks, we're going to remove those 2 points, and we're going to swap them over on the far left into close to heart for 2 points there to get 8 extra percent healing taken for basically yourself, since you're going to be taking a lot of damage on fort weeks. Now, some differences to note here compared to, like, maybe if you've seen my raid guide here for our monk talents, is that we are no longer taking the 1 point that allows us to touch of death anything below 15%, because we basically just only want to touch of death things that are going to die. So that we get the most value out of it. We also do not use Eye of Tiger. This is because we're not going to be using Tiger Palm. And then the other thing to note is that we are using Spear Hand Strike, our interrupt, obviously, because interrupts is a big part of keys. And then also we want to be using Detox, because any monk who doesn't dispel himself or his friends is a bad monk. So definitely make sure you're taking Detox, and make sure you have that set on a mouse over macro of some sort, so that you can get rid of poison and disease effects from yourself or your friends. Now, taking a look at the brew side of things, this is the loadout that I like to use. I've noted a couple things on here. So one thing to note at first, up at the top in the red question mark, I like to take this healing elixir just so that I have some extra on-demand healing. I find that a couple dungeons that this is kind of nice to have. However, I do know that a lot of people like to take where I have the green question mark for quick sip, which makes it so that you purify 5% of your stagger damage each time that you get 3 seconds of shuffle. I kind of feel that because our tier set gives us a lot of like self-healing as it is, through like ticking self-healing, that having like an on-demand quick heal is kind of better than getting rid of some of our stagger damage. But if you disagree with me, you can definitely go with the other one. And then two things that I marked with the yellow arrows here is that I actually like to play with Special Delivery instead of Rushing Jade Wind, just because I feel like it frees up a little bit of the rotation to kind of give myself the damage back without having to keep on refreshing that over and over again. And then I am using Press the Advantage instead of Weapons of Order down at the bottom where the yellow arrow is at there. So those are choice nodes that you can choose. If you want to play with Rushing Jade Wind, you'll get a little bit more damage, but it does complicate the rotation a little bit more. And then if you do take Weapons of Order, you'll get like on-demand mastery and some extra damage, and then you can use Tiger Palm on like bosses and stuff, but most of the key you're just going to be using Spinning Crane Kick anyway, so I like using Press the Advantage here. And then a thing to note too is that on the far left side of this brew tree is we are switching off of Charred Passions. If you use that for raid, you do want to use Dragonfire Brew for keys, as it does more damage and you get more benefit out of it for dungeons. And then the other big thing here is that we are using Stormstyle's Last Keg as well, as compared to like the raid build that I showed off in my other guide, just so that we have 2 charges of Keg Smash for more threat and on-demand damage. Now, taking a look at our rotation. So, the rotation for keys is a little bit different. Basically, you want a Keg Smash if you're about to cap out on your 2 charges of Keg Smash. You'll want to be Blackout Kicking on cooldown. Follow it up with Breath of Fire. Ideally, you do want to always follow up Blackout Kick with Breath of Fire, because Blackout combo will empower Breath of Fire and give us the most damage that way. You'll want to be using your Bone Dust Brew on cooldown. Follow that up with Rising Sun Kick on cooldown. And then, Keg Smash if you don't have anything else to do. And then anything else, you just use Spinning Crane Kick as your filler. So that's going to be our basic rotation there. Now, switching over to our opener then. Our opener, once again, is a little bit different from the raid guide that I made. So for your opener, you're going to want to pre-pot. Then you're going to want to Keg Smash, Blackout Kick, Breath of Fire. Then you're going to want to throw down your White Tiger statue and invoke Nizao. You're going to want to use your Bone Dust Brew and get Rising Sun Kick on cooldown. Then we're going to Keg Smash again we're going to Blackout Kick again, and we're going to make sure to Breath of Fire again to refresh that, as well as making sure that we are using the Empower Blackout combo kick on it. And then from there, we're going to immediately Exploding Keg, Spinning Crane Kick, Blackout Kick, Spinning Crane Kick. Sometimes it does work out to where Blackout Kick isn't available there in the middle, so you just do 2 Spinning Crane Kicks and then another Blackout Kick. And then you just continue with the rotation. This opener, again for this, is all about maximizing Exploding Keg damage, while also allowing you to get the most amount of threat when you are pulling, like, a bunch of mobs in the dungeon. So all of these things work towards getting more damage into that Exploding Keg, making sure that we do use Blackout Kick and then Breath of Fire does cause one of the 2 extra Dragonflight or Brew attacks that come out of that to hit during Exploding Keg, giving us some extra damage there. So let's talk about our stats then. So stats for keys, basically we want to always prioritize agility or item level. Then you want to have about 40% critical strike, so work up to this 40%, and then you can even go a little bit over it, but 40% is generally where you're good at. Next up, you want to have versatility. This is going to give us our survival. This season specifically has a lot of magic attacks on several of the dungeons, so the more versatility we have, it does help, as compared to like mastery, where mastery increases our dodge. It doesn't really help against those magic attacks as much. So I like my versatility to be somewhere between 30 to 35%. The higher keys you're pushing, maybe closer to 35%. And then for your mastery, again, this is what gives us extra chance to dodge whenever we Blackout Kick or whenever we just take an attack. So mastery around 20% is pretty much a good number, and then if you're reaching that 40% crit and that 35% verse, you can put more of your extra stuff into mastery. I did put Leech and Avoidance next. I just wanted to really emphasize that we want as little haste as possible. So that's why I put the Leech and Avoidance up there above haste. We really don't want any haste. Haste is just not helpful to us. As a Brewmaster, we have a 1-second global cooldown no matter how much haste we have. And adding extra haste on top of it doesn't give us very much extra damage. It's the least out of all of our other stats there. So those are our stats. Now, going hand in hand with stats is our consumables and what we want to be using. So, if it is a fort week, I highly recommend using Eye of the Storm as your file. Also, if you are doing like Everbloom and it's tyrannical, you can pretty much go with Eye of the Storm there too, because those are really, really dense mob counts there. But on any other high tyrannical key, I recommend using your Tepid Verse Flask. For your DPS pots, pretty much just using Elemental Potion of Ultimate Power. If you pre-pot at the beginning of a dungeon and you immediately go into some mobs, you can use your Shocking Disclosure pot there so that you have both pots rolling at the same time. But the Elemental Potion of Ultimate Power does do more damage at this gear level now than you will get from your Shocking Disclosure. For healing pots, we do want to use our Dreamwalker's Healing Potion. That's the new healing pot from 10.2. Again, it does slightly less. I think it's like 10k less healing than the old healing pot for its initial hit, but then it does have a ticking hot that goes on for a couple seconds after, which does mean more healing overall. For your weapon runes, you're going to either want to use Buzzing Rune if you still need more crit, or you're going to want to use Hissing Rune if you feel like you need more mastery. I generally just kind of use Buzzing Rune all the time just because it's easier to buy one than to buy multiple, but you can choose to use Hissing if you feel like you need more mastery if you're already reaching that crit cap. As for main stat gems, I find it a little bit harder to reach the versatility, so I do recommend the Resplendent. I can't say that word, so laugh at me. Please tell me how to say it in the comments. I'd really love that. But that Illuminated Diamond, that's the one that gives you main stat and verse. And then for your off-stat gems, it really depends on what type of gear you're using, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But if you find that you need more verse, then you're going to want to use the Radiant Malachite. That gives you verse over crit. And if you are looking for more crit than verse, then you'll want to use the Radiant Atal'Dazar. For ring enchants, again, you kind of have a choice here depending on what you feel like you need. Again, for keys, I generally feel like I need a little bit more verse. I find it easier to hit the crit cap with as much raid gear as I have. But you want to use either 2 devotions of verse, mastery, or crit. You can really mix and match depending on what your sims say that you need, or if you're trying to meet those caps I talked about earlier. They're not really caps, really, but guidelines I was talking about earlier. For weapon enchants, if you have a 1 two-hander weapon, then you'll just want to use 1 Sophic Devotion. If you do have 2 weapons, 2 one-handers, then you'll want to use 2 Sophic Devotions, 1 on both hand. For chest enchants, we're going to use the Waking Stats again. And for legs, we'll use Fierce Armor Kit. Boots, we're going to use Watcher's Loom. And then for our cloak and bracers, I prefer to use Leech. I feel that I don't need the avoidance, and I feel that because our 2 and 4 set really give us that ticking, healing all the time, having more Leech allows us to get even more healing going. So if we do get high stagger amounts, it just kind of helps to offset that. All right, so let's talk about gear. I've created 2 different gear lists here because there's an overall BIS list that I feel is important to know in case you are able to get into raid at all. And so that's what I have here. And then I also have a list for if you don't do any raiding at all and you just want to get all your gear through dungeons. So with the overall BIS list, and really with both lists here, for our tier choices, we were going to want to use helm, chest, gloves, and legs. That's going to allow us to minimize the amount of haste and maximize the amount of crit and verse that we get. For our crafts, I recommend 4 crafted items: the slimy expulsion boots, and then the lifebound shoulders with a toxic armor patch, and you're going to want to put crit verse on the shoulders. I do also recommend making the B-Res bracers. This is because this is the most amount of crit that you can get, and I find that the gear having 500 just of 1 stat on there is really nice. Plus, for keys, it's really helpful if you're able to B-Res, so being an engineer is highly recommended. And then the 4th craft that I highly recommend is a well-fed ring. Doesn't matter which one of the 2 rings that you pick, but definitely make sure to put crit and verse on that. Now, for the raiding weapon side of things and gear weapon side of things, right? So the best in slot weapon is going to be the 2-handed pole arm off of Farok, if you can get it on Mythic. Most of us probably not going to be able to get that on Mythic, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. But if you can get it on Heroic, it's pretty good. The best weapons, I think, are the Thorncaller's Claw. I find that's a little bit easier to get if you do dabble into Mythic at all. And then the Fallen Drake's Bone Splitter from lower of the Mega Dungeon. That has Verse and Mastery on it, so that pairs really well together, especially if you can get it with a high item level from, 489. As for trinkets, our best in slot trinket is going to be the tank trinket off of Farok. It has versatility, and then it has an absorb shield on a 1.5 minute cooldown, and it also just does pulsing damage all the time. And then the prophetic stone scales from lower Mega Dungeon half. That's the cheat death trinket. Even though it gives us some haste, it's not really, the haste isn't why we're going for it. We're going for the cheat death. If you can't get those, then Augury is another good trinket to have. This one also unfortunately comes off of Farok, so a little bit harder to get, but at least for the Tainted Rage Heart and the Augury, those from Heroic are, when you fully upgrade them, do go to 489, whereas the weapon only goes to 483. So those are a little bit better if you can get them on Heroic. And then the other non-raid trinket that you can get if you can't get either of Tainted Rage Heart or the Augury is the Ember of Nullification, which comes from Blackroot Cold. This is really good for a lot of people that have agility or strength because of the fact that it has high verse and then main stat, so it just gives you extra survivability in these higher keys. The best necklace that we can get is the one off of Volcaros. This gives you a little bit of nature damage, random absorbs whenever you deal fire damage, which is all the time, plus it has high verse and some crit on it. Our best cloak comes from Gnarlroot. Our best belt comes from Agira. And then our best secondary ring is going to be Lord Waycrest's Signet out of Waycrest Manor. Now again, this is the overall best in slot list. This assumes that you are doing some raiding. However, I know a lot of you like to just do keys and say, screw raiding. Totally understand that. So here is my list for if you just are doing dungeons to get your best in slot. So, as I mentioned, our tier is still going to be helm, chest, gloves, and legs, and we're going to still want those same 4 crafted pieces with the slimy expulsion boots, the lifebound shoulders with the toxic armor patch, the B-res bracers, and a well-fed ring. Now, for weapons, if you can get Borrowed Time, which is the 2-hander that drops out of upper of the Mega Dungeon, that is going to be the best. It gives you just a chance to randomly deal like extra damage as a dot on targets that you're attacking. However, it does have a lot of haste on it. So that's kind of a downside. If you don't get lucky seeing that in your vaults, the most ideal weapons are going to be your Fallen Drake's Bone Splitters from lower, which are the 2 one-handers that have Verse and Mastery. Honestly, we're not as concerned with the stats on our weapons as much. I would just recommend that whatever weapons that you do get, try to make sure that they have either high crit or high Verse on them, and then whatever other stat you see is there, and that's fine. So like there's lots of different weapons that you can find this season through dungeons, so whichever one's the highest one you can get, don't worry about the stats as much, just go for the highest item level there. Now, for trinkets, we do want the Prophetic Stone Scales from lower Mega Dungeon, and then we'll want the Ember of Nullification from Blackrock Hold. Those are going to be our 2 best dungeon trinkets. As for our necklace, we're going to want the Raven Filigree Pendant from Blackrock Hold. And we're from cloaks, we want the Periwinkle Cloak from Throne of Tides. For our belt, we're going to want the Hound Jowl, however you say that, waistband from Waycrest Manor. And then also for our second ring, we do want the Lord Waycrest Signet from Waycrest Manor. So using these is going to give us our best options for not having any raid going on. Alright, so as far as my dungeon guide goes on the things that you need to have and want to look for, this kind of finishes that up. Now, if you're looking for specifics on how to deal with certain dungeons, certain bosses, stuff like that, please check out my other content. I post commentated full runs of dungeons where you can check out to see how we ran the dungeon, and I give tips on how to deal with different fortified, tyrannical, different affixes. Last week was sanguine, right? So just tips and tricks to deal with each of the dungeons individually. A lot of times there I will post my routes as well, so if you're looking for those types of things, you can find those there as well. If you have any specific questions about this guide, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to talk about different things. If you have different talents you prefer, let us know why. I think it's always good to talk about those things and figure out what is the best that we can use and what works best for you, right? But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please leave me a like. If you liked it a lot, you can subscribe. That helps me out as well too. And yeah, I will see you in the next one. Later.